Shall continue with the antihistaminics. In the last lecture we had started with the antihistaminics. We have seen the classification of antihistaminics. It is classified based on the type of receptor, histaminergic receptor which is being blocked. So there are H1 antagonists or H1 antihistaminics, H2 antihistaminics, and of course there are H3 antihistaminics also, but they don't find wide usage. That's why the classification includes only the H1 and the H2 blockers. And under the H1 blockers we have seen that the major disadvantage with the older agents, okay, which were introduced earlier. So those agents had the major disadvantage that they produced the sedative effect. That was the major limitation. Okay, but then later on a new class came into picture. Okay, that is under that there are 4 subclasses, if you can see, depending upon the sedative property. The various agents under H1 antagonists, they show variable sedative property. So they are subclassified also accordingly. Those ones which are having marked sedative property, those which are showing some moderate degree of sedative property, or those who have mild sedative property. So likewise it is subclassified depending upon their sedative property, because that's a major drawback over here. Okay, then later on the recently introduced agents, so these lack the sedative property. That's because they did not cross the blood-brain barrier very effectively. Okay, so that is the reason why they did not produce the sedative effect, because that sedative property of these antihistaminics is basically due to the blockage of the histaminergic receptors in the CNS, which are responsible for maintenance of the wakefulness. But these recently introduced agents, these are known as second generation antihistaminics or SGAs, the acceptable short form for this. So these SGAs are the latest agents which were introduced, which lack the penetration or they poorly cross the blood-brain barrier. So that is the reason why they did not produce much of the sedative property. So which is a major advantage over the older agents, okay, or the sedative agents. Okay, so if you can see that the SGAs, so these are the H1 receptor blockers which were marketed after 1980. So after these, whichever agents came into picture, H1 blockers, they did not produce any sedative property, or if at all they had it very negligible. So that is why they are classified under the second generation antihistaminics. So there are some properties which are listed down before going into the individual drugs. Because the first property is they have higher H1 selectivity. Okay, so no interaction with the other receptors. Okay, so here it is written that it does not have any anticholinergic side effect. That's because it does not have anti-muscarinic property, which is shown by the older agents. So of course this is an advantage. So many of the points, if you can see over here, they are advantageous over the older agents. Okay, so this is another advantage. Okay, that is, it is highly selective towards the blockage of H1 receptors. They did not block the cholinergic receptors, muscarinic receptor. That's why the anticholinergic side effects which are shown by the older agents, these are not produced by the SGAs. Okay, so this is one advantage. Next point is absence of the CNS depressant property. Okay, so these drugs did not or they do not depress the CNS. So this is another advantage over the older agents. Earlier agents, they depress the CNS, drowsiness was produced, sedative effect was seen. Okay, so concentration power was lacking over there. Okay, so that disadvantage is overcome over here. Then the third point is that it shows additional anti-allergic mechanism. So these drugs not only act by blocking this H1 receptors, but they also act by certain additional mechanisms of action. Okay, because of H1 receptor blockage, most of the antihistaminics, they play a very important role in controlling the immediate type of hypersensitivity. But because these SGAs, they act by certain additional mechanisms which are involved in the later phases of the allergic reactions. Like say for example, by inhibiting the actions of leukotrienes. Leukotriene is another autocoid, so this is also an important mediator of the allergic reactions or hypersensitivity reactions. So leukotriene action was also inhibited, which is generally involved in the later phase of the allergic reaction. So also these drugs have anti-platelet activating factor activity also. Okay, platelet activating factor PAF is another autocoid. Okay, so this is also another mediator. So these SGAs, they can antagonize the actions of this platelet activating factor also. This is also again involved in the later phases of the allergic reactions. So these are the additional mechanisms by which these SGAs can act, and therefore they can control certain delayed type of hypersensitivity reaction. Okay. So the next point is, it does not impair the psychomotor performance, or it does not produce any subjective effects or sleepiness, or even it does not tend to potentiate the alcohol and the BZDs in terms of its impairment or the CNS depressant property. Okay, so this is again an advantage of these agents. Okay, however, one point is that it has a narrow spectrum of therapeutic usefulness. Okay, so far we have seen that it is advantageous over the older agents, but this is a problem now. It has a narrow spectrum of therapeutic usefulness. That's because it is more selective towards the blockage of the H1 receptor. It does not involve any other receptor. So its effectiveness it remains restricted towards those actions which are mediated only through the H1 receptor. So only those aspects of the pathological conditions can be controlled by these particular agents, SGAs. Okay. Now coming to the principal indications or the uses of these particular agents, they are found to be effective in allergic rhinitis. All these are allergic conditions: allergic rhinitis, conjunctivitis, hay fever, pollinosis. So in these conditions, it can effectively control the sneezing or a runny nose. Okay, blocked nose, if at all it is there, it cannot control it. Okay, but running nose it can control. Okay, then the red, watery and itchy eyes, that can also be effectively controlled by these particular agents. Apart from that, urticaria, dermographism and atopic eczema can also be controlled. Then it is also effective, these agents are also effective in certain allergic reactions which can be precipitated after consumption of certain drugs and food. There are some people who suffer from some allergic reaction towards specific drug, or they are sometimes allergic to a specific type of food. That is, after consuming that food, they start precipitating these hypersensitivity reaction. So in such allergic reaction towards the certain drugs and food can also be effectively treated by this drug. However, they do not have effectiveness in the pruritus. They don't have any antipruritic activity or antiemetic activity or antitussive activity. Whereas in case of older agents, we have seen they have antiemetic as well as antitussive property also. So that is lacking over here with these new agents. So to start with the individual drugs, the first one is fexofenadine. Okay, so this drug, it is an active metabolite of terfenadine. Actually, terfenadine it was the first non-sedating SGA which was discovered. Okay, but then later on it was withdrawn from the market. That's because it was responsible for production of certain type of arrhythmias. That is a very dangerous type of arrhythmia, torsades de pointes. Okay, and deaths were on record due to this particular side effect. Okay, so this arrhythmias, okay, so these are fatal type of arrhythmias which were precipitated by this particular drug terfenadine, and this specifically these arrhythmias were precipitated at higher doses or when it was administered along with the CYP3A4 inhibitors. Okay, so only at the toxic doses of this terfenadine or when this terfenadine is combined with the CYP3A4 enzyme inhibitors. So the CYP3A4, it is a metabolizing enzyme. So certain drugs can also inhibit these metabolizing enzymes or the microsomal enzymes. So examples of inhibitors, the drugs which can inhibit this metabolizing enzyme include erythromycin, clarithromycin, ketoconazole and itraconazole and so on. So certain antimicrobials, they can inhibit this particular enzyme. Sorry. So this enzyme, when it is inhibited, so it resulted in the increase in the concentrations of this drug, because this is involved in the metabolism. So that's how, by inhibition of this enzyme, when terfenadine is combined by any one of these drugs, it resulted in the increase in the plasma level. So this particular side effect was precipitated. So there are more chances of precipitation of this side effect when this terfenadine was combined with the CYP3A4 enzyme inhibitors. So this is the reason why this terfenadine has been withdrawn from the market. Now, why this particular side effect was being precipitated? That's because this particular drug at higher doses, it resulted in the blockage of this delayed rectifier potassium channels in the heart. Okay, so in the heart, as you are already aware of the action potential which is generated in the heart. Okay, so the depolarization phase, it is due to the opening of the sodium ion channels, and later on after that a plateau phase is seen and the repolarization takes place. This is what is normally happening in the action potential of the heart. Now the repolarization phase that takes place mainly because of the opening of this potassium channels. So this opening of this potassium channels is blocked by this particular drug terfenadine, specifically in higher doses or when it is combined with these drugs. So because of the blockage of these potassium channels, the repolarization was getting affected, and that's how the arrhythmias was precipitated. The repolarization does not take place very effectively, so that's how arrhythmias were getting precipitated. So this was the mechanism by which it produced the toxicity. For the same reason, it has been withdrawn from the market. And one more drug, estemizole. This is another SGA which was introduced. This was again banned for the same reason. Okay, this reason, torsades de pointes. This is the life-threatening adverse effect which was precipitated by this particular drug also, estemizole, because of which it is being withdrawn. Now coming back to our drug fexofenadine. So this has an advantage that it has low propensity to block these delayed rectifier potassium channels in the heart. So that is the reason why it does not prolong the QT interval. Okay, because these potassium channels are not blocked, or they have low tendency to block this potassium channel. So it will not interfere with the repolarization in the heart. So QT prolongation does not take place. So also there is no interaction with the CYP3A4 enzyme inhibitors also, because it is hardly getting metabolized, not getting metabolized. So there is no chances of any interaction with the CYP3A4 enzyme inhibitors. Okay, so it is free from any arrhythmogenic potential. However, in certain cases, ventricular arrhythmias may be precipitated, especially in those individuals in whom already there is some problem with the conduction. Okay, or maybe there is pre-existing QT interval prolongation. Okay, so it is not entirely safe, though it has low propensity to block these potassium channels. Though you cannot say that it is completely safe in those patients who already have a prolonged QT interval, or who are suffering from bradycardia or hypokalemia. So it can be quite dangerous. So as far as possible, you need to avoid this particular drug in such individuals. Okay, it may not be safe, or it may precipitate the arrhythmias in such individuals. Then coming to the kinetics part, this fexofenadine, it does not cross the blood-brain barrier. Okay, so that is the reason why it does not produce any central effect. So there is no sedation which is produced by this particular drug, no impairment with psychomotor performance, or it is also free from any atropinic side effects also. Okay, then when administered orally, it is rapidly absorbed and excreted unchanged. It is not metabolized. That is the reason why it does not show any interaction with the CYP3A4 enzyme inhibitor. So it is excreted as it is without any metabolism. So it is excreted in the unchanged form in the urine as well as in the bile. Okay, and the plasma T half-life is 11 to 16 hours with the duration of action that is 24 hours. So it's quite a long-acting agent. Then coming to the next drug, that is loratadine. Okay, so this is again a long-acting agent which is quite selective for the peripheral H1 receptor. So it can block the peripheral H1 receptors. Okay, so it lacks the CNS depressant property because it cannot cross the blood-brain barrier effectively. So it can block the H1 receptor only in the periphery. Okay, then it is partly metabolized by this particular enzyme CYP3A4. Okay, only partly metabolized. Okay, not completely metabolized by this particular. So this enzyme does not play much important role in the metabolism of this particular drug loratadine. Okay, and after metabolism an active metabolite is also generated. So this metabolite also has the H1 antagonistic property, and this metabolite has even a longer T half-life, even more than the parent drug, that is 17 hours is the T half-life of the active metabolite. And since there is no interaction chances, so there are less tendency to precipitate any kind of cardiac arrhythmias. So there are less chances of interactions also with the other drugs, okay, macrolides or antifungal drugs. There is no interaction chances because metabolism does not play a very important role over here. However, in higher doses, seizures may be precipitated, okay, in certain individuals. So this is a drawback. In toxic doses, seizures may be precipitated, though arrhythmia precipitating tendency is less likely, but seizures, okay, epileptic attacks may be precipitated. It is specifically used for these two conditions, urticaria and atopic dermatitis. The next drug is desloratadine. Now this is again an active metabolite of loratadine, the earlier drug. Okay, so an active metabolite is generated, we have said. Okay, so that is desloratadine. So this active metabolite, it is effective at half the dose as compared to loratadine. Okay, so it is twice as potent as loratadine. Okay, again side effect tendencies are also less likely with this active metabolite. Psychomotor performance interference is less likely. So also cardiac safety is also better as compared to loratadine. Then the next drug is cetirizine. Okay, now this drug cetirizine, it is a metabolite of hydroxyzine actually. Okay, and it again had a very high affinity towards the peripheral H1 receptors. So again this drug has poor penetration into the blood-brain barrier. Okay, so it lacks the sedative property. Okay, but sometimes the subjective somnolence, that is somnolence is the deep tendency to go to sleep. Okay, so certain sedative property may be seen, but only at the higher doses, not at the therapeutic doses. Again, an important property is that it is not metabolized. Okay, no metabolism is involved over here. So there are less chances of interactions with the drugs like erythromycin or ketoconazole, and there are less chances of it precipitating the arrhythmias. There is less chances of prolongation of the QT intervals. Okay, so arrhythmia precipitating chances are less with cetirizine. Okay, now apart from being a blocker at the H1 receptor, this cetirizine also acts by certain additional mechanisms also. That is, it can inhibit the release of histamine. Okay, so apart from being a blocker at the H1 receptors, okay, for histamine, it can itself also inhibit the release of histamine. So histamine which is stored, okay, as a result of certain reactions or certain immunological reactions or hypersensitivity reactions, the histamine gets released. Okay, so such a release of histamine is also inhibited by this particular cetirizine. So also apart from this inhibition of release of histamine, it also inhibits the release of some other cytotoxic mediators also from the platelets. Okay, so also it also inhibits this chemotaxis of the eosinophil. So the movement of certain cells as a result of certain reactions at a particular site where there is some tissue injury. So sometimes it may result in the chemotaxis, that is certain cells will be attracted towards that particular site. So all these reactions, okay, which are specifically seen in the secondary phase of the allergic response, that is in the later phases. So all these reactions can also be inhibited by cetirizine. So it acts not only by blocking the H1 receptor but also has some additional mechanism by which the later phases of the allergic response can also be effectively controlled by cetirizine. Apart from this, another advantage is that it can attain high and long lasting concentration in the skin also. So this is the reason why, because it is highly effective in the allergic responses or hypersensitivity reaction pertaining to the skin, like urticaria and atopic dermatitis. So it is quite effective in these conditions. So also, since it is getting accumulated in the skin, for the same reason it acts for a long period of time. Okay, so even though its T half life is just 7 to 10 hours, even once daily dosing may be sufficient to control these allergic conditions. Okay. Now coming to the indications, okay, that is the uses. It is specifically utilized in the upper respiratory tract allergic conditions of pollinosis, urticaria, atopic dermatitis, and sometimes as an adjuvant to other drugs in case of seasonal asthmas also. Then the next drug is levocetirizine. This is an active enantiomer of cetirizine. Again, this drug is effective at half the dose as compared to cetirizine. So it is twice as potent as cetirizine. So also side effects are also less as compared to cetirizine. Next drug is azelastine. This is again a newer H1 blocker and it has a good topical activity. Okay, so skin related condition it is quite effective in. Okay. Apart from that, being a H1 blocker, in addition to that it can also inhibit the histamine release, okay, just like cetirizine. So also the inflammatory reactions which are triggered by the leukotrienes and platelet activating factors, which may be involved in the delayed type of hypersensitivity or later phases of the allergic reaction. So those can also be controlled effectively by this azelastine, and also has bronchodilator property. So this is an advantage specifically in the asthmatics. Apart from that, an additional mechanism is also seen with this particular agent, that after intranasal application, that is when you apply it in the nose, after intranasal application, it shows the down regulation of these adhesion molecules, intracellular adhesion molecule 1 expression. It is reduced. So these are the molecules, adhesion molecules, as you can see. So it mediates the antigen antibody reaction. So their expression is reduced in the nasal mucosa. So this could be effective in controlling certain type of immunological reactions also. Okay. Then the T half life of this drug is 24 hours. So it's quite a long acting agent, and again active metabolite is also generated. So this active metabolite has even longer lasting action as compared to the parent drug, and metabolism it is inhibited by CYP3A4 inhibitor. So there are chances of interactions which are possible with this drug. Okay. Then given by the nasal spray, generally it is given in the form of a nasal spray for seasonal or perennial allergic rhinitis. So here in these conditions it is quite effective, and it can effectively control these allergic conditions for around about 12 hours. So quite a long lasting action is seen upon local application at that site. However, the disadvantage is that stinging sensation or the burning sensation may be produced in the nose after the spray has been applied into the nasal cavity. So also alteration in the taste perception may also be possible with this particular agent. Okay. Then certain other disadvantages are also seen, that is side effects like somnolence may be seen after nasal application, that is some sedative property is there after nasal application, and after oral use specifically there may be a chances of weight gain. Okay, so this is the disadvantage shown after the oral use of this particular drug or oral administration of the drug. Next drug is mesolastine. So this is again a non-sedating antihistaminic Okay, this is effective in allergic rhinitis and urticaria. T half-life, it is 8 to 10 hours. Okay, in spite of having a short T half-life, still single daily dosing is sufficient for this particular agent, and no active metabolite is generated. Okay, after the metabolism, no active metabolite is generated with this particular drug. The next drug is Avastin. So this particular drug gets converted into an active metabolite known as carbastin, and this active metabolite, it has T half-life of 10 to 16 hours. So this is again a newer agent which is having non-sedating properties. Okay, it does not produce any sedative property, and specifically used in the nasal or skin allergies. Okay, so in the nasal region, if at all there are some kind of allergies or skin reaction, so in such conditions Avastin is quite effective. Okay, then another point to be noted is that QT prolongation, which we have seen with the certain agents, specifically at the higher dose or when they are combined with the CYP3A4 inhibitors. So such kind of interactions are not seen so far in the animal studies. So far any such arrhythmogenic tendency is not on records, but yet it is better to avoid in such individuals who are susceptible. So far there are no reports of such kind of arrhythmogenic tendencies or precipitation of the arrhythmias, but still it has to be given very cautiously in those individuals who are already having pre-existing QT interval prolongation or bradycardia, or those who have any kind of conduction defects in the heart. So better to avoid in such individuals. Next drug is Rupatadine. Now this drug again, it has an antihistaminic property. It can block the H1 receptor, and additionally it also has platelet activating factor antagonistic property. So it can block the actions of platelet activating factors also. So this is the additional mechanism of action, and this is the major indication with this particular drug. Allergic rhinitis is the condition for which it is majorly used. Okay, so this finishes the individual drugs. Coming to the uses of the H1 antihistaminics. Okay, so most of the things we have already covered. Okay, so these uses are for H1 antihistaminics as a whole, not only for the HGS. Okay, so the first and the very important use will be allergic disorders. So specifically the older agents could effectively control the immediate type of hypersensitivity reactions, and certain newer agents we have seen that they act by additional mechanisms, so they will be helpful in controlling the other type of allergic reactions also. So few of them are listed over here, which we have already seen: itching sensation, urticaria, seasonal hay fever, conjunctivitis, angioedema of lips and eyelids, that is swelling may take place over here. So such type of allergic reactions can be effectively controlled by H1 blockers. Then next use is insect bite and IV poison. Okay, so we have seen that certain insect bite may also result in the similar type of allergic conditions. Okay, so here also H1 antihistaminics are quite helpful. Next condition is pruritus. Okay, so this is again an allergic type of condition. Common cold, allergic type of common cold can also be treated. Motion sickness, we have seen that certain antihistaminics have the antiemetic property, so they are effective in motion sickness. So some are also effective in morning sickness and other type of vomiting also. Then next is vertigo. Okay, that is appearance of things going around. Okay, so this condition can also be controlled. Vertigo can also be controlled, and the symptoms of vertigo can also be effectively controlled. The next is as pre-anesthetic medication. It can also be utilized. Okay. The next is cough, because certain agents have antitussive property also. Parkinsonism, we have seen that certain agents, okay, which have central anticholinergic properties, they can effectively control certain symptoms of Parkinsonism also. Then next use is acute muscle dystonia. So here there is abnormality in the muscle contraction, so that can also be controlled. Then apart from that, they can also be used as a sedative, hypnotic or anxiolytic also. Specifically because of their CNS depressant property, they could be helpful in all these conditions. Then next part is the H2 antagonist. So far we have covered the H1 antagonist. Now coming to the H2 antagonist. So the first H2 blocker, burimamide, this was discovered by the scientist Sir James Black in 1972, we have seen. But this particular drug was not promoted as such because it did not have any specific clinical advantages. Okay, even this one, the next agent which was introduced was methiamine next to burimamide. Okay, this was the next agent which was introduced, but both these were not found to be any effective in any clinical condition. So that's how they were not promoted much. But then later on in 1977, cimetidine was introduced, and later on after this many agents came into picture: ranitidine, famotidine, roxatidine, loxatidine. So many examples are available. Okay. So these could effectively control the actions or block the actions which are mediated by H2 receptor, and specifically more important one is the gastric acid secretion. Okay, so we have seen under the actions of histamine that through H2 receptors, histamine can promote the release of the acid in the stomach. Okay, so by its action on the histaminergic receptor, it acted on the proton pump, and more acid was being produced. Okay, that's what is the action produced by the histamine through H2 receptors. So what H2 blockers will do, they can effectively control the acid secretion. So H2 blockers were promoted in the use of peptic ulcers, because this is the condition wherein there is increase in the acid production. Okay, so ulcers, why people suffer from ulcer is because when there is any kind of imbalance in between the protective and the aggressive factors, and one of the aggressive factors is the acid which is produced. Okay, so decrease in the acid production helps in controlling this peptic ulcer. Okay, so for that matter, these H2 blockers have been used quite widely in the treatment of peptic ulcers, or even other kind of gastric hypersecretory states, like maybe some kind of tumors which may be secreting more and more acid. Okay, Zollinger-Ellison's syndrome is one of them. Okay, wherein there is more production of the acid. So this H2 blockers find a wide usage in these conditions, wherein there is excessive production of the acid in the stomach. Okay, so these were quite popularly used when they were introduced. Okay, but later on, as the proton pump inhibitors came into picture, omeprazole and all, omeprazole, pantoprazole. Okay, so when proton pump inhibitors were introduced, their popularity reduced a little bit in this particular condition, in the peptic ulcer treatment. Of course, we will be studying this in detail. All these drugs will be studying in detail under the chapter peptic ulcer. Okay, so it is not covered here much in detail. Next is H3 antagonist. Of course, there was one agent which was introduced, that is thioperamide. Is a H3 antagonist which was introduced, but it did not have any clinical utility. So no clinical usage or no therapeutic usage found with this particular agent, so it is not promoted. Okay, so this finishes the chapter. Coming to the important questions from the exam point of view, the actions of histamine are quite important. Pharmacological actions which we have seen. Okay, so either a note on straight away on the actions of histamine could be asked, or maybe certain names will be given, like say give the actions of histamine on the blood vessels. Such type of questions could be asked. Then the next important part is the triple response of histamine. This is very important from exam point of view. It has been asked many times in the papers. Okay, triple response. Okay, so that is the red spot, wheal and flare. Okay, so you need to tell what are these three and what is the cause behind producing these three responses. Okay, so it's because of basically the effect of histamine on the blood vessels. So that you need to explain in detail. Okay, the next important question is pathophysiological role of histamine. So how it helps in the normal physiology and pathological conditions in the body, that you need to discuss over here. Next is the classification of antihistaminics is important, H1, H2 blockers, okay, and of course the subclassifications. Next important question is note may be asked on the second generation antihistaminics, because these are the ones which are used nowadays. So a note can be asked on these SGAs, or sometimes advantages of the second generation antihistaminics over the older antihistaminics may also be asked. Okay, so we have seen quite a lot, many advantages are there. So these advantages may be clubbed with this question, classify antihistaminics and give the advantages of second generation antihistaminics, or write a note on second generation antihistaminics. Such questions may be asked. Okay, so this finishes the chapter.